one funeral director told me, "I wouldn't recommend this job to anyone." And I was really surprised because just before saying that, they told me how much they loved their job and they felt it was a calling. So I think we need to be talking about this all the time because they're experiencing that stress now. We need to handle it now before there's another period of really heightened stress where it pushes them over the edge.
Welcome to FD Talks, the forward-thinking podcast created to help funeral professionals run their business and serve families. Join us as we discover important funeral and death care topics. Gain incredible, dependable, and valuable information to help your business succeed in a rapidly changing environment.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of FD Talks. I'm Rob Davidson, and today we have got a powerful topic to discuss that's likely impacted almost every funeral professional. Many funeral home staffs have experienced workplace stress. That's nothing new, but not every funeral director knows how to best manage stress and burnout. So today, Dr. Melanie Carr joins the podcast to discuss her book on emotional intelligence, and she's going to explain how having a high emotional intelligence can help you combat stress and improve your overall service to families. Well, Dr. Carr, thanks for being with us today. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and maybe how you got involved in the funeral profession?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. First of all, Rob, I appreciate being here and getting to talk about this. You know, I definitely didn't have a straight path into this profession, but I felt like it's a God-led path. My background is actually in television news. I did that for about a decade and then got into PR and marketing and did that for many years, but really just didn't feel fulfilled by it. I really felt God was leading me to do something where I was helping people. And by chance, a friend of a friend brought up the funeral profession and was like, "That's something you ought to look into. I think you'd be great helping families prearrange their funerals." So I kind of took a leap of faith, and I did that for about a year as an independent agent before I found Funeral Directors Life and got an opportunity to join them, and that was about 14 years ago. So it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I love helping people. I love what we do. So I really feel like, this was a calling for me.
One of your more recent, I think, contributions to the profession is this book, Emotional Intelligence for Funeral Directors. Let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, maybe we could define what emotional intelligence is, and then maybe why that's important for funeral directors.
Sure. And I'm glad you're asking that because I don't think a lot of people really understand what emotional intelligence is. When I first bring it up, I'll get a kind of a weird look from people, or they think it's all going to be touchy-feely and talking about love, but it's much deeper than that. This is a mental ability, and it's really how we process emotional data that we're getting from people as we interact with them, and then how we're using those emotions and that information in order to achieve our goals. So it's very important when you think about not just for the funeral profession, but I would argue for all of us, because most of us are interacting with people all day, every day. I mean, unless you're sitting in front of a computer and that's your job, you're probably having a lot of interactions with people. So how well are you reading them? How well are you understanding what they're going through? How well are you able to manage your emotions and their emotions? So I think it's an important process for everyone to get a better handle on emotional intelligence, but especially for funeral professionals who that's all they do all day, every day is work with people and work with grieving people.
So I guess if I'm hearing what you're saying, it's possible to be an intelligent person but not be emotionally intelligent. Is there a distinction there, or what are some common things that you see as that can keep those two from coexisting?
Sure. No, they're very different. So your emotional intelligence is not the same as your IQ. I think most people are familiar with the term IQ, your intelligence quota. You probably took a test for that back in grade school, age 10, 11, somewhere in there. But your IQ is really testing your logical and spatial ability. How well can you figure out a word problem or manipulate items to fit a slot, that type of thing. So as you can see, that's very different from how we process emotional data. And I would argue the emotional intelligence is more important because we are interacting with people all day for most of us. So that dictates how your relationships go, how well you are solving problems between people. So I think that's what leads to your ultimate success. I read somewhere that your IQ usually is what helps you get hired as an entry level into a job because they're looking at how well you did in school and what your grades were and things of that nature. But it's really your emotional intelligence that dictates your future success. People who have a high emotional intelligence, those are probably the people who are getting promoted because they get along well with everyone. They're great at solving problems. They stay cool under pressure. People just enjoy working with them. But the reverse is true as well. People with low emotional intelligence are probably walking themselves out the door because they're the ones that may be having conflict with coworkers or their managers, or they're not as professional or handle situations as well with clients. So it really dictates your long-term success, and that's why I believe it's more important than your IQ.
What was it that you saw that was happening in funeral homes that maybe caused you to want to explore this topic and maybe create some materials that could be helpful?
Sure. Well, in my current role as the Director of Sales Development, I'm in funeral homes all day, every day. So really, when I started to go back to school to work on my PhD and start my dissertation, I knew I wanted to do something to help the profession. I really didn't stumble upon emotional intelligence. At first, I just wanted to look at work stress because that's what I witness every day. I can easily tell when somebody's stressed out. They're sharing their story. They're telling me they're burnout. There's tears in their eyes. That's kind of a common occurrence. This is a real struggle for them. So I really wanted to explore work stress and was there something that I could find that might be able to help them. And lo and behold, after doing a lot of research, that's when I stumbled upon emotional intelligence. And there's been a lot of studies on the benefits it has for people, how it helps them in their jobs. There wasn't a lot of studies, though, about how it correlates to stress, though. So that's really what I wanted to find out is there a relationship between the two? And that's when I think I stumbled upon something pretty exciting because my research and more current research is proving that there is a direct relationship between them. The better your emotional intelligence is, the lower your work stress is. So if you have low emotional intelligence, it's going to be pretty high. So it's a scale that works in an inverse relationship at that, and that's pretty exciting because what I've also found is emotional intelligence is something that can be learned, it can be taught, it can be reinforced with training. So we can improve upon that. So if you can improve your emotional intelligence, you have more control on the stress that's affecting you. So to me, that's pretty exciting.
Have you observed that maybe funeral professionals at large have generally lower emotional intelligence scores going in, or is there something that maybe biases them towards that?
Actually, from my research, I would say they're probably moderate to higher. I think a lot of that is because the ones who have low emotional intelligence probably worked themselves out already. That clearly would not be a job that they could handle long term because of the stress that's inherent with this position. So by and large, I found moderate to high emotional intelligence with funeral directors. But I definitely found those who were on the lower spectrum of that. Those were the people who were struggling a lot more with stress and feeling burnout of the profession.
What are some signs that you think people who are experiencing emotional intelligence issues, what are some signs that they should look for to maybe start looking for help?
If somebody, I think it all starts with the interview process. When you are looking for someone, I hope you're trying to find someone with higher emotional intelligence. Not only is it shown to lower your stress levels, but it's also been shown that people with high emotional intelligence have better performance, they're more motivated to do their job, they have higher persistency, all positive spectrums. But I think it starts at the interview process when you're trying to find an employee to really dig into the meat of it, of their experiences, because that's what will tell you how emotionally intelligent they are. I've been working for many, many years. I won't say how many, but for a long time, and I've been a part of a lot of interviews. And I think too often places either interview by asking closed-ended questions or asking leading questions, and that's a problem. So let me give you an example. They might say something like, how well are you dealing with stress? That's a leading question. I think most people would know, okay, I need to respond by saying, oh, I'm great at handling stress, right? Few people are going to say, oh, I'm terrible. I'm very stressed out. So that doesn't really help you in find the right candidate. So it's better to ask scenario questions. Questions like, tell me about a stressful incident you've had at work and how did you handle it? Takes some of the pressure off of them that they're not having to admit they've been stressed out. We know they've been stressed out. So what happened? And I think from that you want to see, one, did they handle it great? Okay, that's a very good sign. But even if they handled it poorly, follow up and ask them, what'd you learn from that experience? Because you also want to see growth. Again, emotional intelligence can be learned, can be improved with time. So you want to see that they've learned something from it. If they didn't, if they just said, some people can be jerks. That's all there is to it. Okay, well, they're clearly, I would say, low emotional intelligence. But if they learned from that experience, that's a great sign. Can I give you an example of that, Rob?
Sure, absolutely.
So I had one funeral director that I spoke with. He relayed an experience he had with a very angry gentleman. He had lost, I believe, his father. And he came in and was really upset about the price. Didn't think the cost was fair. And this funeral director was trying to explain the value, what goes into all the services and cost. This gentleman wasn't having it. He was very irate and upset. And this was just continuing until finally the funeral director left the room, came back in with the telephone book and just threw it on the arrangement table and said, just go find somebody else. So the gentleman got upset and left. Well, that was definitely a sign of some low emotional intelligence at that point. He didn't manage his own emotions or the other person's emotions. But in digging further, okay, what did you learn from that experience? The funeral director went on to say, I was so ashamed of myself. I knew I didn't handle it well. Like, I let my emotions get the best of me. I should have just realized this guy's upset and he's grieving and he's taking it out on me. So I ended up calling the gentleman back and apologizing, and he ended up coming back and said, okay, I'm going to let you still handle the service. And I'm like, how has that affected you over the years when you're dealing with someone who's really upset or angry? And he's like, I reflect on that. And I just pause and like, this isn't about me. I step back, I take my pride and ego out of it. So you could see through his journey that he's grown so much in his emotional intelligence. Now I would say he's got pretty high emotional intelligence. So you can learn a lot from someone just by digging in and asking more in-depth questions. And that all can be done in the interview process.
That's a great story. I'll change gears a little bit here and talk about something that I know everybody's tired of talking about, but I would like to. We recently had, the pandemic. I think I talk to different people who are in different types of service and different. I know a couple of counselors and therapists and people, and the pandemic is still something that's very real to a lot of people who deal with people in that emotions. As far as emotions go, what do you think that for funeral directors in particular, how do you think their emotional intelligence has been affected by something as dramatic as the pandemic was?
That was a terrible time for all of us, but for those working in the funeral profession, that made a stressful career much more stressful. And I think, unfortunately, that was kind of the breaking point for a lot of funeral directors who were already stressed out. That was kind of the final straw that made a lot of them decide, okay, it's time for me to hang up my hat and look elsewhere. I think although that time has passed, we have to remember that this is a stressful career. That just because the pandemic's over, that heightened moment of stress may be gone, but these people still have a stressful job that they're doing all day, every day. My book and my initial research was done prior to COVID. And even during that time, I was still hearing people's stories about how stressed out they were. One funeral director told me, I wouldn't recommend this job to anyone. And I was really surprised because just before saying that, they told me how much they loved their job and they felt it was a calling. And when I asked them, why wouldn't you recommend this? They said, because it is so stressful. It is such a hard job. I just wouldn't recommend it to someone else. I had another funeral director told me it was like being a lobster who was put into a pot where the water is slowly increasing. I mean, doesn't that paint a visual? that lobster is slowly dying. And that's how this gentleman felt that being a funeral director was slowly killing him. So that's their day-to-day reality, not even in a heightened time when there's extreme stress. So I think we need to be talking about this all the time because they're experiencing that stress now. We need to handle it now before there's another period of really heightened stress where it pushes them over the edge.
And what are some other things that maybe are at risk by not focusing on emotional intelligence?
Well, like I said, emotional intelligence has a lot of positives. So it increases your motivations, your productivity, your persistency, your overall well-being and happiness. So that's going to correlate to how well you are working with your families too. And I think we can't forget that aspect of it. You know, if the funeral director is struggling, if they're feeling stressed out or burnout, they're probably not giving their absolute best to each families they serve. They can't at this point because they're under such a great load of stress. So we have to remember at the end of the day, we're trying to take care of the families that are going through the worst days of their life. You want your team to be at their peak. You want them to be at their very best so they can give the families their very best. So I think it's so important that they focus on this all the time, not just for their stress, but their stress is important because that's affecting their well-being. I mean, if they're stressed out, they could be having mental problems, health problems, life-threatening problems because of all this.
You had a couple of statistics in the book that they were kind of staggering. One of them was that it says 50% of funeral professionals leave the profession before 5 years, and 70% before 10 years. How did you uncover that, I guess, and then how do you think that affects the funeral home's ability to serve families in their community well?
The statistics are very staggering. The first one, the 50% leaving within the first 5 years, I had heard at a national convention, and that really shocked me because one of the problems I see on a daily basis visiting funeral homes is staffing issues. They're either short-staffed or they're about to lose someone and they're trying to struggle to find someone. Finding good quality people is really hard. So, you know, when I heard that, we can't be losing people who have already gone through school and have already done the work and have entered the profession. You know, we need to be able to retain them. So I'm not assuming that all 50% of them left because of stress, but we've got to assume stress is part of it. The job was much harder than they anticipated and probably more stressful than they anticipated. So that's what really made me start looking into this topic. But, you know, that correlates to the people you've got on your team now. If you're short-staffed, the people that are remaining are probably doing more of a workload than they should be doing. And there's a whole resource demand theory that, you know, if they don't have enough resources to do their job well, that's when stress starts happening to them. And again, that will trickle down not just to them, but to their coworkers. Negativity spreads quickly. It will trickle down to the families that they serve, that they're not getting the best or the fullest attention. You know, it just has so many ramifications that this is a serious problem.
So I hear time and time again funeral directors telling me that students coming out of mortuary science programs aren't necessarily as equipped to deal with funeral business in general, but what has been your observation about them being emotionally intelligent coming out of school?
Well, from what I've heard from either people who just got out of school or for some funeral homeowners, this is not a subject that's widely taught in school. There's some that may have a course on stress, which I'm pleased to hear that. Unfortunately, I think all too often we just kind of touch surface level and we go over coping skills. To me, coping skills are very important. It's what do you do when you are stressed out? How do I handle that? And of course, that's important, but that's very reactionary too. It's almost saying like, I know I'm going to be stressed out, so here's tools to deal with it. I'm really trying to take it to a deeper level, like what could you do before stress actually hits you so that it doesn't have such an impact on you. So I applaud those schools that are starting to have those conversations about stress, but I think there needs more to be done. I mean, we just hear that people don't always feel equipped for this job, or maybe they don't really understand what they're getting into or how stressful this job can be. So I think it's kind of all of our imperative to make sure these people who are going into this profession really have a good understanding of what they're getting into.
I know you've already talked a little bit about this, but I'd like to go ahead and ask you a little bit more detail on how funeral homes can identify and hire emotionally intelligent funeral professionals. What does that process look like?
I think you need to look at their experience. You want someone who's shown a good flow and progression, taking on more responsibility, more duties. That definitely shows that they're able to resolve conflict. They get along with coworkers. Seeing some upward mobility is a good sign. If they're jumping from place to place to place, that's probably not a sign that they're well equipped to handle it. I told you about some interviewing techniques you can do, and I would go through those different scenario questions and in many different aspects. Tell me about a time you dealt with an angry customer. How did you resolve that situation? Also checking references, but asking them some questions too. How great were they at resolving conflicts? Did families seem to enjoy working for them? Was that a problem? Just trying to see a big picture of their abilities and their skills and get to the meat of trying to find out, are these people emotionally intelligent?
As we wrap up today, what are some things that maybe some practical ways that funeral professionals can focus on and grow their emotional intelligence? Do you have any tips for them, or just things they can take away from this right now?
There is a lot of resources out there if people want to improve on their emotional intelligence. I do want them to know it's not a quick fix, right? This is a mental ability, so this is a skill set. So you're going to have to put some effort towards that. But if you're serious about wanting to get better in that, there's CE courses, there's tons of books and articles on the subject. I'd say read. It helps you be more aware of that. I think it takes for someone, if you're working on your own to improve your emotional intelligence, you really do need to have some good self-awareness and be able to reflect on situations. So what I usually tell people who are trying, after you've had a stressful situation, and enough time's passed that you can look at it more rationally. Try to view the situation kind of from a third-party perspective. Try to get out of your own shoes and what you thought, but just really go through the situation. What happened? How did it make you feel, and why? What was triggering your emotions? You need to understand yourself. Chill. But then what were you noticing in the other person? Body language, tone of voice, facial gestures, anything like that. Were you correctly reading what they were feeling and have a good understanding for that? And then how did you manage the emotions in the room? And finally, were you able to reach the desired goal? If you can start doing that, you'll start seeing where gaps are. Okay, I didn't handle this situation real well. When I said, when I said this, I could tell that rubbed him wrong. I should have clarified. So if you can start doing that on your own, that's great. Some people don't have that ability. They're just see it through their own viewpoint. I'd say those people should look at getting a mentor or coach, somebody who can help them through that. But even I tell this to a lot of funeral homes that I've worked with, start training your managers to be talking about this with your team. Nobody's got to be the expert, but during your regular one-on-one meetings or even team meetings, just bring up the subject. Who had a stressful encounter with someone this past week? Let's talk about it. What happened? What do you think you did well? What could have we improved upon? Taking little steps like that just makes you become more aware. And once you're more aware of a situation, you'll start changing your behavior with it. And over time, you will definitely see some progress.
Let's quickly talk about the book. Are there some tools in here, maybe some suggestions? How did you kind of create this as sort of a handbook or a starter kit, or kind of tell me a little bit about it?
I definitely wanted this just to be a starting step into this topic. I know our funeral directors are busy. They work a lot of hours and they work hard. So I wanted to keep the book short so they could read it and get through the whole thing. I did include exercises at the end of each chapter, so they have some tools to get started with this. And I just wanted to relate with them in a way that I hopefully connected with them by sharing other funeral directors' stories so they could see themselves in that. And hopefully that light bulb went off like, okay, I need to take some steps in this direction.
So the title of the book is Emotional Intelligence for Funeral Directors, The Secret to Less Stress and Burnout at Work by Melanie Carr, PhD. Where can somebody buy this?
Sure, that's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, so it's out there.
Special thanks to Dr. Carr for joining us and sharing her thoughts on this important topic. We hope this episode has given you a little bit of insight into what emotional intelligence is and how it can help you manage stress, burnout, and your health. And remember, there are plenty of ways you can grow your emotional intelligence, so be sure to explore your options. And if you're interested in learning more about this topic, you can find Dr. Carr's book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. If you would like more information about today's topic or previous discussions, please visit us online at funeraldirectorslife.com/FD Talks. There you can find information about this podcast and submit any comments, suggestions, or feedback about our series. We also welcome your ideas for future episodes. Listen to FD Talks wherever you get your podcasts.